All right, how's it going, guys? My name is Alex Mead. I am going to do this as a video just because my microphone capabilities aren't really working, it seems like. So I'll just do it as a blank video and upload it from there. But the book I did is called Drive: The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink. It's a book about motivations and how in the United States, the different drives, and I guess not just the United States. He goes into talking about different aspects of the world, but the different things that drive us. And his main argument is that intrinsic motivation is a lot better motivator than extrinsic motivation. So I'll start jumping into the book summary now. So Daniel Pink argues that there are three types of motivation. There's motivation 1.0, which is basically basic drive. It is the initial human operating system. Pink states that operating system is based purely on biological drive, that this biological drive was inadequate. Simply going after, food, water, shelter, the need to reproduce, that's not enough. That's not what drives human beings. So at this point, he moves into motivation 2.0. And what motivation 2.0 says is that humans set out to seek rewards and essentially avoid punishment. So this is basically if you do this, then you will get this result. It's very, very extrinsic motivation, which it's interesting because I would have thought that throughout the world, in fact, that we were more extrinsically motivated than we are intrinsically motivated. I'll go into why Daniel Pink argues this is not true in a little bit. But so he goes on later to talk about motivation 3.0. And basically what this is it's intrinsic motivation. People do things because they want to do it. It goes way beyond just the simple using a financial reward for something. Instead, it goes more into that mastery of skill. And a lot of case studies that Daniel Pink did, as well as other people did, show that just simply giving a reward is not enough. People do things because they inherently want to do things. So, going into the early stages of the book, he introduces this thing called the carrot and sticks analogy. And it's a use of extrinsic motivation to get people going. You offer them rewards or penalties. Basically, if you do X, then you'll get Y. But it doesn't really work. What's very interesting, as I mentioned earlier, Pink did quite a few case studies, and what they actually showed is for high function tests, tasks that involves a lot of cognitive thought. If you offer a high reward, you're not going to get the results you expect. And the people who get offered a medium reward and a small reward usually perform about the same. For these higher tasks, people do things because they want to do it. They're intrinsically motivated. But with the carrots and sticks analogy, when you are doing extrinsic motivation, you are lowering your performance in the long run. You're going to crush creativity. You're going to foster very short-term thinking. And at minimum, you're going to strip all enjoyment out of the task. So that's the extrinsic motivation. Towards the middle of the book, a little bit earlier, but I broke these down into beginning, middle, and end just for summary reasons. He introduces self-determination theory. And this theory shows that people have an innate drive to be autonomous, self-determined, and connected to one another. It's distinguishable from independence because autonomy emphasizes choice, and it does not necessarily oppose interdependence. So some managers will assume that people are incapable of doing tasks just simply because they want to, that they need that drive. So that's where we always think, give them an extrinsic motivator. Well, what Pink argues is if you check in with these people, if you're, making sure they're doing well, then ultimately they will perform these tasks a lot better than you would even expect. He argues that corporations claim to empower workers. They're actually not doing this. Not doing this until the intrinsic motivation is being met. And then it kind of leads, if it's not being met, it leads to a lack of engagement and a disregard for mastery, which is extremely important when it's coming to these tasks. We tend to reward in all corporations with extrinsic motivation the highest worker. If you are able to make this quota, I'll give you a bonus of $2,500. If you come close, we might acknowledge you, but if you're in that lower part of it, you get no acknowledgement whatsoever. So in this extrinsic motivation system, we are only acknowledging the highest performers, essentially. Sorry. And then towards the end of the book, Pink starts to argue that the pursuit of purpose is essentially the third drive. This is motivation 3.0. And it's starting to manifest in the 21st century more and more. Under motivation 2.0, there's really no need for, or there's no purpose other than profit. Pink argues that you have no purpose in life, essentially, or at least at the very minimum in the workplace, to do things other than for profit. And that people are only externally motivated. As he gets more into 3.0, he says, no, people are very intrinsically motivated. An example he uses at one point is, why do people play instruments on the weekends? You're not going to get any financial benefit out of learning to play the trumpet, but you do this because you want to master the skill, you want to be good at it. What really surprised me about this section of the book, and I talked about it a little bit ago, is the link with high reward and low performance. Overall, like rudimentary tasks, so very basic like physical tasks, if you offer a high reward, you're usually going to get a pretty low response from it. And then as soon as the task becomes more mentally difficult, then people turn to intrinsic motivators. So when I read this part of the book, I didn't believe it at all. And so I actually went out and researched it a little bit more. And there are several cases where this was found to be true. And what was interesting too is I was able to draw from my track background. I ran track at UNC for 5 years, and thinking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, I would have thought I was always extrinsically motivated. If you don't perform, then I'm going to lose my scholarship, and that'll be that. Well, after reading this, Pink argues that no, my main motivator might be for performing better than for actually keeping that scholarship. So the drive to perform for a time rather than money is going to be the big one. And they did several case studies. Pink mentions a couple of them, but one of them was in India, where they took Indian workers, offered them 2 weeks salary, 1 month salary, and 2 months salary. If they were able to perform the highest level of this task, they would be in that 2 months category, lowest 2 weeks. And what they found is the people who were in the middle and the bottom, the 1 month and the 2 weeks task, really didn't perform any higher than the other ones. The people who got offered the 2 months task, we saw a huge drop just because people were not as motivated to perform this highly, because we're getting out of that rudimentary tasks category. So that kind of summarizes this book. Overall, I thought it was pretty interesting. The main lessons that I learned from this, main lessons I learned from the book. Daniel Pink has uncovered 3 primary ways to look at intrinsic motivation. And the first is trying to spark a sense of autonomy. This can be freedom within organization. And he essentially explains that people want to run their own lives. They don't want to be directed. If bosses or CEOs let people do the work at their own leisure, then they will be more likely to give higher results. The second part is experience a sense of mastery. Figure out if the tasks... Sorry, I was reading off my notes. Basically, if you want people to master what they're doing, bosses need to come down and talk to them. If your employees are performing at a much higher result, or they think the task is way too easy, then you need to make it more difficult for them. If the task is way too hard, you need to lower the difficulty level. You essentially are bringing the mastery to them. And as soon as you do that, then people experience this sense of mastery, and this intrinsic motivation will start to happen. And the third one is trying to find a sense of purpose. So by giving a sense of purpose, it helps answer the why question to many tasks that people are having. Why am I doing this? What's the point of this? Once workers understand the why, they can be intrinsically motivated. They understand the purpose, that kind of see that end result, and then they'll be motivated to get their work done. So those are the main lessons that I learned from this book. My recommendations to improve it is I still think Daniel Pink does downplay extrinsic motivation. And the only reason I say this is I go back to what I talked about a little bit ago with my track stuff, and I still overall think I was pretty extrinsically motivated, and these weren't just basic rudimentary tasks that I was doing. It was stuff that we had to do over and over and over, and if I wasn't on scholarship, then I don't think there's any way I would have wanted to put in that work. I wouldn't have been as intrinsically motivated to keep going. I almost needed that carrot dangled at the end of the string to get me going with it. So I still think in society there is room for extrinsic motivation, but I do think we are very intrinsically motivated, more so than I had even realized before this. And then the last point, and again, he mentioned several case studies from researchers throughout the world, and then I had found a few, but I'd be curious to know if people even know that they're intrinsically motivated. Somebody like me who had no idea that intrinsic motivation was a lot bigger of a leader than extrinsic motivation. I would just be curious to see if there are other people who think like this. He mentions this very briefly, kind of in the middle of the book, but I would maybe like to see a little bit of a survey to see if people, put down, are you motivated by intrinsic or extrinsic factors? Because I want to learn to do this, or because there's a $5,000 reward at the end of it. If they say, I want the $5,000, then maybe explain, okay, well, are you sure about this? And that might get more people to say, yes, I'm very intrinsically motivated. But overall, it was a good book. I was a little skeptical about it at first. Definitely took a little time to get going, but I enjoyed it as a whole. So hopefully this uploads okay, and thank you.